I'm Graziano Marcheski with Shalom World Television, and we're here at St. Bonaventure Parish within the Archdiocese of Chicago. My former childhood parish, as a matter of fact. I grew up right down this street. We're standing on this bustling street in front of the former convent, which is now the office of the Vicariate II, and therefore the office of Auxiliary Bishop Francis J. Kane. We're here today to interview Bishop Kane and learn more about one of the shepherds of the Archdiocese of Chicago. Please join me. Bishop Kane, what a delight to be here with you. You were an early supporter of Shalom World. When they first came to Chicago, you helped inaugurate their presence here at one of the conferences that they sponsored.
Correct, yeah.
Celebrated
I remember
Mass.
It was just starting out, and it was such a wonderful, enthusiastic group of people, and they really did a nice job, I thought,
that's great.
in the beginning.
I've had the privilege of knowing you for many years and through many ministries. I've known you as a diocesan agency director, as auxiliary bishop, as vicar general. That's a lot of ministry and a lot of years. So we're here to learn about you specifically. And I know that you come from an Irish family.
Yes.
That's always very important, Irish people, right? Your mother is from County
Mayo.
Oh, Knock is in Mayo.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So Irish people are reputed to be incredibly faithful Catholics. The apparition of our Blessed Mother at Knock, I would imagine, had a big impact on any Irish woman. Talk a little bit about your mother's faith and how her faith impacted your family and you in particular.
Okay. Well, you know, she actually was from Knock.
Yeah.
And so, you know, that was all part of their kind of lore. And one of our relatives, supposedly, this would be several generations ago, actually is one of the people that saw the apparition.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was always part of the family. And I remember my mother telling us stories about how she would take a bicycle to go there. It was about a mile away from their home. And all the different things that this was long before the great basilica was built there. You know, when it was just a small little country church.
Yeah. So growing up, was Marian devotion a part of family life?
Sure, very much so. You know, and my mother had a great devotion to her Blessed Mother, and we often prayed the Rosary at night as a family, the sense of the Blessed Mother's presence in our lives was always very, very strong.
Yeah. I've always kind of secretly envied families that knelt down to pray the Rosary together. I've heard that. It seems like a lot of men who became priests came out of families that had that devotion. What was it like? Was it a hard sell for your parents to get you boys to get down and pray the Rosary?
It depends, you know. Because, you know, you'd be watching television and all of a sudden it was time for the Rosary. And so we weren't always the, you know, most eager to do that. But it was a great, great foundation in faith to have that.
So you visited Knock yourself. What was it like to visit an apparition site?
Well, it was very interesting. You know, my grandparents are buried there.
Oh, really?
And so the site of the apparition is the old church that was there, and they've built a kind of chapel out where the apparition took place on the wall of the church. And you look out over the cemetery where my grandparents are buried. It's a great feeling just to go there and to see all of that and to realize that, you know, they were very poor and, you know, didn't have much. And to see, you know, just all that has transpired there is just a remarkable thing.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your vocational journey. I think each priest's journey is unique. You know, the questioning, the assurance, the doubts. What was it like for you as a young man discerning priesthood and then making that commitment?
Well, a few things. You know, one, my family was very supportive, and I think that's so important that families support a young man or a young woman if they are discerning a vocation.
Yeah.
And the community was also much more supportive then. So I think that was a great thing for me, you know, in terms of having that kind of people and community behind me. Personally, you know, it's always an up and down journey. You know, there are times when I can, you know, look back and say, gee, I really had some real doubts. There was once even, I think I wrote home when I was at Mundelein to say I really didn't think this was for me, and I was coming home at the semester.
Wow.
And then it just, I talked with some priests, and it really did change me. And instead of kind of worrying about all of that, I was much more at peace and felt more that kind of consolation of the call of the Lord in my life. So I did continue on. My parents were kind of like all expecting me to be staying home, but instead I went back to the seminary. And
Was that a good surprise for them?
yeah, I think so. I think they were very happy with that. But, you know, I mean, they were also very much willing to let me make my own decision, which, you know, I've always appreciated.
Yeah. Bishop, if I could do a quick follow-up on that vocational discernment. So were the questions that were going through your mind, did they have to do with spirituality and wondering if you were the kind of man who could be a good priest? Or did they have to do with you know, the commitment to celibacy? I know in my own vocational discernment, I talked to some priests who said, in order to be a happy priest, you have to have a good, strong prayer life. And I looked at myself and I knew I didn't. I thought,
yeah.
And that's really the reason that I left the priesthood. Of course, after I left them, my spiritual life came to life, and I did much better. But what was it like for you?
I think a lot of it was, you know, was this really a life that I would be able to appreciate and enjoy and feel productive? And so I was looking at it and questioning, you know, whether this was the kind of life that I should be leading. And I think as I prayed more, as you say, that's a very important part of it. Then I think I felt more kind of an ability to surrender to God, and whatever He had in mind for me, I was going to do it.
Well, we're certainly grateful that you did decide to say yes. As I mentioned earlier, one of the first ministries that you were involved in, where I encountered you, was, I believe, 6 years or so, where you were director of the Office for Peace and Justice?
Yes, yes.
That's very different from the kind of ministry you're doing now. Talk about that. That's, in some ways, a very cutting-edge ministry. Sometimes it can put you into areas that are a bit contentious.
It is, and it was a time, too, where I was coming from parish ministry. I had been an associate pastor at 2 parishes and very happy with that. And Cardinal Cody asked me if I would start the Office for Peace and Justice. So,
oh, you started it?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it was kind of starting from scratch, but there were many things that I think were kind of cutting edge and sometimes contentious. And after Cardinal Cody, and he was very supportive of that, after he died, and it was then Archbishop Bernardine came, he was in the middle of the writing of the pastoral letter on the challenge of peace.
Yeah.
And so that was very, very cutting edge. And he was excellent, you know, in terms of helping me to understand the kind of nuances of the issues. And it was also a very contentious time in our own country's history, you know, with the kind of conflict with, you know, the Soviet Union and all, and the buildup of the arms race. So it really was a very interesting time to be part of all of that.
So you worked under Cardinal Cody, and then you worked under Cardinal Bernardine, who was kind of legendary.
Yeah.
Talk about, do you have any memories that you could share with us about Cardinal Bernardine in particular?
Well, you know, he was a wonderful man. He was a real gentleman and a Southern gentleman. You know, you didn't hear it in his voice except when he got tired. Then all of a sudden, he kind of went back to his roots in the South, in South Carolina, and his voice kind of took on a little bit more of a Southern drawl. But he was so much of a gentleman. He was also very, very intelligent. And he would realize, if he'd looked at something, this is what's important, that need to, emphasize this. And he had a real sense of trying to bring people together rather than to kind of divide people. So he had a great sense of bringing the whole Catholic community together.
He certainly made an impact on the Chicago clergy that first night when he introduced himself and said, "I am your brother Joseph."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was really a brother, I think, to the priest, and he did so much for the diocese in his own very gentle way.
Another position you held, which I had not known about, was you were Director of Catholic Relief Services. That's a huge operation. CRS is like in 100 countries doing charitable work all over the world. How did you come to take on that ministry and describe the work that you did?
Well, it was all part of the peace and justice work.
Okay.
And so I was just a local director. I wasn't director in Washington or anything. So what you do with that is you help to bring the awareness of the work that CRS is doing internationally, to bring that into the local community here, and to try to help them to raise funds and to build awareness to the needs of people around the world. So it was a very, very interesting kind of position, and one where people would be coming through town and you'd get to meet some of them that were kind of legendary. So it was very nice.
Well, CRS is my favorite charity because I know the money I give is all going to go to the cause for which I gave.
Yes.
So that's reassuring to me.
You're putting your money in the right place. That's a great place.
I think of someone like Bishop Robert Barron, who is a priest of this archdiocese, and the videos that he puts on YouTube. I looked at one recently. I mean, many of his have hundreds of thousands of views, and this particular one only had like 25 or 30,000, and I caught myself thinking only.
Yes.
I went, what priest gets to preach to 20 or 30,000 people?
It's pretty intimidating when you think about it. The responsibility, and he does such a good job with that, of engaging people and really speaking to the milieu in which they live. I think it's wonderful.
Talk about some of the challenges that you faced over the years in this role and some of the ways that you've tried to meet those challenges.
Well, there are many different challenges. This is a very diverse community. I was saying to you earlier before we were on the air that this past Sunday I was with the Indian community from Kerala and had Mass with them. And I've had Mass with the Vietnamese about 2 weeks ago. And there's a whole kind of range of people that live in this vicariate. And so just to be able to come to them and to help them to realize that they each have their own wonderful, rich culture, but they also belong to the one Catholic Church, the one holy Catholic Church. That's so important. And so to help people to realize that, I think, is one of the great challenges that's out there. I think also, for me, one of the challenges was I was used to being a parish priest. I had been a pastor, and I loved it, and it was a very different thing when all of a sudden you're put into the role of a bishop. I think at first kind of floundering about what does that mean, and how do you be a bishop for people? And I think what helped me a lot is I started to pray about it, and I thought about the idea of trying to be a shepherd to the shepherds. So we have 62 parishes in this vicariate and about 400,000 Catholics. And we have all these pastors that are out there, and many of them are working so hard and so well, but they need someone to kind of shepherd them and to help them. And I think that's what my job is as an auxiliary bishop, to try to help them to be better shepherds themselves, but to also shepherd them and help them to realize, just how important their job is.
Well, I hope I don't embarrass you, but I knew you would be a good bishop because you never really wanted to be a bishop.
I didn't.
Right from the beginning, I knew how much you loved being a pastor.
Yeah.
And you would have been very happy
Oh, definitely.
remaining a pastor.
Yeah.
Pope Francis in particular has been needling those careerists who are always looking for the next step. And you're not one of those people. And so I think because of that, you were a perfect candidate to be a bishop, and you've been a wonderful bishop. I'm so grateful to have lived within your vicariate for all these years. As you go around to the parishes and meet the people, what do you hear from them? What do they look for from their bishop?
I think so very often they are looking to be part of something that's bigger than themselves, bigger than their parish, even bigger than the diocese, and that's what they're looking for. They really see this as a link to help them to be part of this great church that we belong to, and that this is a way of kind of linking into that more deeply. I think that's one thing they look for, and I think they also are looking for someone to assure them that, that Jesus is with them, and that they can see that Christ is not just somewhere far off or a thought that somebody had, but it's really part of their lives and part of their community.
Yeah. And of course, when they're going through pastor transition, they're looking for you to assign Jesus as their next pastor,
yes,
right?
Yeah. But he needs an MBA if he's going to be a good pastor. Yeah.
Well, okay, so it's pretty clear that you work hard, 24/7. What do you do for fun?
Well, I don't get as much time for fun as I'd like, but I have some very close and dear classmates that we've gone through the seminary together, and we're still together. We have a house together that we've had since we were first ordained. When we were ordained, it was a time of great transition in the church, and many of the classes in front of us, they had lost large numbers of their newly ordained after 6 months, a year, 5 years. And so we made a very intentional decision of trying to stay together to support each other. And so over all these years, we've gotten together on our day off, and we'll go out for dinner. We attempt to play golf every once in a while. I think the other people that are on the golf course are not so sure that we're playing golf, but it's great fun to be with them.
Yeah.
They're also a wonderful source of kind of inspiration for me, and I've learned so much from them. It's really a great thing.
Well, from the interaction I've had with you over the years, it seems like you definitely have found those ways to avoid burnout, because in ministry, that's the big danger, is that we're so used to taking care of others, we forget to take care of ourselves.
It's one of the things that I worry most about with the priest in this vicariate. I try to visit with them every year. I go and visit in the parishes, and I always get the priest by himself, and I ask him some questions. And the first one is, do you take a day off? Do you get some vacation time? Do you do a retreat? Do you take time to pray? Those are the ways that I think you avoid burnout. That if you do things like that, you're going to be a better priest, because you won't be kind of self-destructing. So I think that's very important.
You're close to celebrating your 50th
I know.
Jubilee. How far away is that?
It's 2 years, year and a half now.
Year and a half, wow. As you look back on the nearly 50 years of your priesthood, what have been the things that have sustained you? So not just the burnout, but what's kept you hopeful? What's kept you from becoming cynical? What's kept your prayer life going?
That's a good question. First of all, I look and I think, God has managed to write straight with some pretty crooked lines. I've been all over the place in some ways, but I still have people that I'm friends with from each of my different assignments, and I'll keep in contact with them. But I think that I've learned a lot of things. One is that, people can be a great and edifying part of your life. That if you allow people to express who they are and their own deep faith, it strengthens your own faith immensely. And so that's something that I think I've always tried to do, is to let people talk about their own story, and it's always a faith-filled story that inspires me. I know that, and that's probably the best thing. And I think I also then look and see that, I've had other kinds of influences, spiritual directors that have helped me over the years, times when I didn't understand what, God was calling me to. And, if you just talk with them, and they can help you to figure out some of those things that sometimes you don't understand yourself.
What about the various ministries that you've moved through? Has that helped to keep things fresh, or were they big enough challenges that they could keep the wheels oiled?
Any assignment I've had has been uplifting. It has inspired me, and it has, I hope, deepened my own faith. And each of them are very different. Even different parish assignments. There are no two parishes that are alike, and each parish has its own kind of personality, if you would, and each of them can help you to be able to see how God is at work in our world. Yeah. And then some of the other assignments, with peace and justice, you get to see people in a different way, people that sometimes are on the margins, people that have all sorts of other experiences that are just not part of being in a local church like Chicago. And it's a great thing. It really does inspire you a lot.
You're not going to want to answer this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. And maybe you've already given us a hint. Of all the things you've done, what's been your favorite ministry?
That is hard. I've never had one that I haven't liked, despite myself. And sometimes I didn't think I was going to like doing it. But I think being a pastor is the one that I'd go back to. You're with people, and you're part of their lives in a way that I just find absolutely overpowering. And so I would have to go back and say, of all the different ministries and assignments that I had, I think that's been the one that I've most enjoyed. And I can remember, the way I found out about being a bishop. Cardinal George called me, and it was late on a January afternoon, and kind of getting dark and everything like that. And he said, the Pope wants you to be a bishop. And I said, oh, I was just absolutely shocked, because I thought I was too old. I was like 60 years old. And so I was there, and I remember looking out the window and thinking, this is really something I love, and it's all gone.
Oh, yeah.
So that was sort of, I think, kind of an initial reaction to all of that, but that's part of being a priest too, that you have to learn how to give up things. And I always tell priests that if you're not sad at leaving an assignment, then probably that wasn't a good assignment for you.
Yeah.
It should kind of rip your heart out.
And when you get into the new one, if you don't find it life-giving, in some way, even if it's not something you would have chosen.
Yeah, and there's always life in any of the work of the church, I think, and that's maybe one of the jobs a priest has to do, is to figure out what is going to be life-giving for them in a particular assignment.
Yeah. Being in a position like yours, you hear all kinds of good news, and you see all kinds of wonderful things, but you also hear a lot of heavy things, and there's bad news. And part of the bad news is not as many people are going to church, and the finances are always an issue. The Archdiocese is going through massive restructuring because of fewer vocations. As you look at the future, what gives you hope for the life of the church?
Well, I think it has to be people, especially the young people. Probably they'll shoot me for this, but saying one of my favorite things is doing confirmation. Even though, it can be overwhelming. I probably do about 60 a year.
Wow.
And so, it's sometimes difficult, I mean, you're tired when you finish.
I'll bet.
But one of the things that I always see, and why I love it so much, is the enthusiasm and the faith of the young people that are being confirmed. You just wish you could kind of bottle that and keep that. And you hope that no matter what happens in their lives, that always remains part of them, that great enthusiasm that when they come up for receiving the sacrament, that lives with them forever.
Yeah. So you've probably confirmed a number of young people who one day will be considering priesthood or religious life. If you had a few of them listening to us right now out there, what words of encouragement would you speak to them?
Well, the first thing that I think I would tell them is that I've never regretted being a priest.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing.
I mean, when you get up in the morning,
Yeah.
sometimes you can be tired or whatever, but I've never said, oh, I wish I were not a priest. I always am so grateful, and I see that as such a blessing in my life. So I think that's the first thing I would tell them. And the second is that, it's a privilege that God gives you if you're called to a vocation, because people will let you into the deepest parts of their hearts and souls. And what a wonderful thing that is. It's a privilege. But you have to use it well then, and to help them to understand that God is with them, whether it's some profound moment of joy or terrible moment of sadness or anything in between.
Absolutely. How can we, as lay people, as members of parish, do a better job of supporting our priests?
Well, people do an enormously good job of supporting priests, first of all. And
That's good to hear.
I always tell priests, you got to listen to what people are telling you. And people are always telling us, sometimes very indirectly or very shyly, but telling us how much our ministry is appreciated. So I would put the kind of responsibility on the priest, first of all, to listen to what people are telling you. And then with people, I would say, don't be afraid to be very explicit about saying something to a priest, especially if it's something that's going to encourage them or build them up.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Heart Talk. Our hope is that through this conversation with Bishop Kane and our other conversations with local bishops, that you get a deeper understanding of the important and challenging work of our local bishops. Let's please keep Bishop Kane and your own local bishop in prayer. I'm Graziano Marcheski. God bless you, and we'll see you the next time.
To all of the viewers of Shalom TV throughout the world, I want to encourage you not only to support this amazing media apostolate, but to spread the word to others. We all know how the internet and mass media are polluting the world with the poison of pornography and so much other forms of materialism. This is the source of eternal life, the gospel, and Shalom TV is consecrated to spreading the word of Christ. Thank you.
Shalom World, God's own channel.